instead of my.
There we go. All right, I think we are all set up. Great. Welcome, everybody. And thanks for joining us today. It's a busy time of year, so I really appreciate your taking the time to view this. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Nikki Taylor. I'm a early childhood educator and mother of 3, grandmother of 5, and used to work for OPCC full time. And I'm really grateful and happy to be able to stay connected to OPCC through the technology we have discovered through the pandemic. So one of the good things that happened through the pandemic. I'm hoping that I can share just some quick tips for you that will brighten and maybe take a bit of stress off your holiday season. It can be a very hectic and crazy time, especially with children. Many of these things probably aren't new to you. They're just kind of gentle reminders that the holidays really are about, family and rest, and can get complicated with young children. So they may end up being a different kind of experience once you have children, but can be quite magical. So let's get started. So 7 quick tips. Let's see if I can move my, and here we go. There we go. Technology is not always my friend. So one of the things that is really, really important, I think, is creating traditions for your family. Many of you probably have traditions that you grew up with, and maintaining those is wonderful. But once you have a family of your own, it is an opportunity to create some traditions and some magic for yourself and your children and your family. Children don't necessarily remember the presents. They remember the gifts. They remember the things that you do for much longer. They can be the constant and predictable part of what is otherwise often a very chaotic and crazy time of year, particularly at Christmas time. So children thrive on predictability and consistency and sort of being able to count on things. So traditions can be a way to create that for your children and helps create some calm and also some excitement, depending on what your traditions are. Young children have this gift of magical thinking, which is part of the reason that they can, see 6 Santas in a year and believe that Santa does exist. So you want to sort of work with that. It is a developmental thing, so it does go away. And you have to sort of create magic in a different way as they get older. You can still create magic, but so finding fun ways to, and understanding that children really do believe in this magical time of year. Traditions can create unity, can bring families together. Over time, they can tell your family's story. We've lost the art of sort of carrying on family stories and things like that. So traditions are a way to do that. We have a few traditions in my house. We always do gingerbread houses. I always give everybody pajamas, and even my adult children now wait for those things. So they wait for the pajamas. If they don't think they're there, they're like, "You're doing pajamas, right?" Especially when I moved away about 18 months ago. So they're like, "We're still getting pajamas, right?" So even as adults, we look to those traditions to create the experience of the holidays. So they don't have to be big. They don't have to be expensive. They can be things like, if you look at some of these pictures, hikes, picking out a tree, decorating a tree together, all those kinds of things. You may have some traditions that you already do, like I said, so carry those on. And the other thing you might want to think about, because Christmas is a time of giving, is, are there ways to start to create traditions for your children that are involve the community? So there's lots of people, particularly elderly people, who don't get visitors and don't get, sadly, people to spend time with. Are there opportunities to maybe make some Christmas cards for some of those folks in maybe in senior care and things like that? Donating or helping out with food banks. So you can start with donations, and then as your children get older, maybe you want to take them to the food banks and help them see what happens with the food that you donate and things like that. So there are lots of ways out in the community to sort of extend some of those traditions, to give more to your community as well as to your family. The key to traditions is the consistency piece. So traditions don't become traditions really until you've done them for a few years. And you've probably got lots of traditions over in different times of the year as well. So they really do help families, like I say, connect. And during those bumpy times in life, traditions can really help stabilize and connect people, and make those bumpy times in life a little bit easier. Moving on, this can be a tough one. This was a tough one for me at Christmas time. The whole less is more, let's simplify. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. When I was younger and my children were younger, I really did overdo the gifts. You couldn't see the tree for the presents and things like that. So, and it's easier to do when they're younger. So, you know, a couple $100 goes a long way when your children are 3. But when they're 13, a couple $100 probably doesn't even cover the cost of one thing that they want, which is usually tech or something like that. So one of the cautions I'll share with you is when your children are young and you do some of these things, you set expectations and precedents. So if you load up, then sometimes, I know for me, I expected it of myself, and then therefore my family over time started to expect it as well. Christmas was a huge deal in our house. My house was decorated to the nines. It looked like a store. It was beautiful, but it took me 3 or 4 days to do it. It was a lot of work. I loved doing it, hated taking it down, but it does set expectations. So you want to just be mindful of that. The other thing with a lot of gifts, for example, is you'll probably find that your children get overwhelmed. So they'll open 1 or 2 gifts and that's all they want to do. And then people get disappointed because the kids don't want to keep opening gifts. So often Christmas gift opening can last a whole day or more than 1 day, because children need time to process, and they'll get caught up in one gift and they'll want to play with it, and and things like that. So you have to be prepared for those kinds of things, just sort of following your children's lead. So the less gifts there are, the better. And you may want to extend the gifts over a few hours or a few days even. I'm a Hallmark movie junkie. I love Hallmark movies. I start watching them as soon as they come on. And they all have the same script. It's quite amazing, but I still like to watch them. But what you have to realize is real life is not like a Hallmark movie at all. And sometimes if you're like me and you like these movies and you like that sort of feeling that they give you, you can try and replicate that in your real life. And it's just not how life works. So just be careful. Again, it's more about those expectations and doing less. Spending more, just thinking about more time spent with family and time spent and things like that. Keep it simple but significant. I love this idea because we do tend to complicate things, and young children particularly thrive more in simplified, sort of calmer environments. So often we put children into situations that they're just not able to handle. I often talk about birthday parties as one of those. We put children into these environments where it's crazy, it's chaos, it's loaded with sugar, the boundaries aren't clear, only one person is getting presents. So we put children into these environments where their emotional systems just get overwrought, and then we start to get behavior, and then we get stressed as adults, and it just becomes a cycle. So over the Christmas holidays, we want to try and keep things simple, but things that matter, things that are significant, is a good way to think about these things. Involving kids in the prep, it's not always pretty, but it is important. Again, something I learned in hindsight. I love, fancy trees and things like that. So I inadvertently over time created a message for my kids that the trees decorating was mine to do, because I didn't really value what the kids did with a tree. So I didn't mean to do it, but it happened. So over time, I started finding myself decorating the tree by myself, and I had to reflect on why that was. So now with my grandkids, I have 2 trees here, and I have a couple of grandkids that were here, and I just put out the boxes and I just let them do it, and I have not touched the trees since. So when my granddaughter comes over, she sees the tree just the way she left it, so that she can feel part of the whole celebration. Planning early, not too early, but early enough. You know, I used to start shopping in September, and problem was I didn't stop. So if you're one of those people, don't start buying too early. But planning out sort of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and who you need to help you and those kinds of things can really help simplify the things that you have to do and the busyness. And the final thing on this slide is the expectations versus the reality. We always have these grand expectations of things in life, not just Christmas. And often the reality falls short. And this is where we start to get stressed, we start to get emotional, we start to get frustrated, because we have this set of expectations of how it's going to go, what our family is going to be like, how our children are going to behave, all those kinds of things, how people are going to react to certain things. And then the reality is nothing like the expectation was. So we want to be really, really careful that we temper our expectations, particularly around our children and our children's behavior. Because it can, if we expect them to sit nicely and, you know, at the family dinner table, or we expect them to take turns opening presents and things like that, the younger they are, the more likely it is that that's not going to be a reasonable expectation, given the excitement of the time. So we want to make sure that your celebrations are things that are for your family, and you're not trying to replicate something or someone else's Christmas. So just a few things to kind of think about. Tip 3. This should be done every single day, regardless of the time of year, and that's take care of you. As particularly as moms, we often feel like, you know, it's our job to take care of everybody else, and if we happen to have something left at the end of the day, we're lucky. If not, that's just part of, you know, being a mom. And that's not the case. We have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves. Children, raising families is exhausting work. It's intense work. It's ongoing. It's 24/7. And if you don't take care of yourself, then it's the old adage, you're not going to have anything left to take care of other people, particularly your kids. So it's not selfish. This is actually an act of selflessness. When you take care of yourself, you're in a better place to be able to take care of others. So the challenge with parenting is nobody's going to come to the door and knock on it and say, here you go, have a day, right? And often you don't need a day. A day once in a while is nice, but you often need just, you know, maybe a half hour every day. So it's not one certain day, it's again, that continuity. So you do have to carve it out and make it a priority in your life. When children are young, they take a lot from you. So and there's lots of things that come up that you don't expect. So you really want to plan for these moments, whether it's, you know, you get up 20 minutes early and you grab a cup of coffee without anybody up, or you take a walk every day, or you read a book, or you call a friend, anything that sort of fills you up. You need to plan for it. You need to carve it out and make it a priority. The other thing that happens when you do this is your children watch. Your children watch everything you do. So when you do this, when you model this self-care, what you do is you teach your children that self-care is important. And when they grow up, the care is them. So they learn to take care of themselves as well. So you're modeling a really great habit for children to do in their own lives as they get older. So it's great role modeling for your children. So just think of those, you know, it doesn't have to be big. It can be those little things that just kind of fill you up a little bit and give you a bit of energy. Maybe it's yoga in the middle of the day while the kids are napping. It can be anything. It's a very personal thing, but particularly during stressful times like the holidays can be, it's important to do this first and then, take care of everything else. This can be a tough one. And particularly when kids are young and they don't have a lot of emotional regulation and they get overstimulated very easily, we don't want to hype them too early. If you're a toddler, a day can seem like forever. If you're a preschooler, a week is an eternity. So young children don't have a sense of time. So when you say, Christmas is in 3 weeks, that means nothing to them, because they just don't have that sense of time until they're usually around 6 or 7. This is hard because when you go to the stores, I was in Costco in August and they had snowsuits and one aisle of Christmas out already in August. I love Christmas, but even for me, that's too early. So you can't hide it from the kids when you take them out, but you can manage and control how much of it you do in your own home. So if you have those children that get really overly excited, you want to think about that when you start to do your planning and your prep around the holidays, because children who are very excited and overstimulated often have trouble behaving well. They may have trouble sleeping, all those kinds of things. So you don't want to set them up for that too early, because it's going to be hard on you too. So keeping it sort of slow and steady, a little bit here and a little bit there, can be really helpful, particularly for those young kids or those children who get, again, overstimulated or overwhelmed quite quickly. So it depends somewhat on your child's temperament and things like that. But it can really help just to play it low key and just take it slow. Number 5, this kind of goes with the self-care piece. Managing stress. We live in a very stressful time. We have just come out of a very stressful time for an extended period of time with the pandemic. So even though you may not feel stressed, you probably are. And even though your children may not appear stressed, there's probably an element of residual stress that has come out of the pandemic. So we always want to manage stress. Stress can kill a holiday spirit like nothing else. And it's often the reason things go south. So we want to make sure that we're managing our own stress. So again, that self-care piece is important. Identifying what your stressors are, finding ways to do things to reduce it. Check in with yourself and your children. It's a great habit to get into, because sometimes the stress, we're so engulfed in it, we don't actually recognize it. We may see it more in our kids and we don't see it in ourselves. So doing those sort of daily check-ins. How am I feeling? What's my body doing? How am I behaving? Sometimes your kids will tell you in not so many terms, why are you yelling at me, mommy? And it's like, okay, that's probably stress. And a lot of the behavior we get in children is also linked, at least to some extent, to stress. So again, simplifying some of these things that we're talking about are ways to manage stress. So self-care, simplifying, watching your expectations, those kinds of things can help you manage that stress. And then finding ways to cope. It's important to find ways, and again, you're modeling for your children. So everything you do, good or bad, is modeling something for your children. So when you talk about stress and you label stress and you model ways to manage stress for yourself, but as a family as well. Maybe it's going for a walk in the woods. It's one of the best ways to reduce stress, is to get connected with nature. Maybe it's you and your kids doing yoga together, because you're probably not going to get a good session of yoga by yourself until they're in bed, but you can engage your children in some yoga. Eating well, sleeping well, managing your schedules and things like that. I put the elf on the shelf under this one. The elf on the shelf, you either kind of love it or you don't. And it can create a lot of stress, which is why I've put it here. So there's sort of two trains of thought that I always think about with the elf. One is people use it as a threat. The elf's watching. If you don't behave, Santa's not going to come. The elf's going to report you. So big brother, big elf is watching. And what this assumes is that children have control over their behavior. And the younger the child is, the less that is the case. Behavior is just an outward symptom of something else that's going on. So children have difficulty, particularly in exciting times and with all that goes with Christmas. Children will have difficulty managing their behavior. So the elf watching actually creates more stress and will probably, in many children, create more behavior, because now children are under a great deal of stress. And what you're doing is kind of taking that magical piece away from kids. So now Christmas has become this very stressful, I got to manage my behavior, the elf is watching kind of experience. So it is certainly your family's choice on how you use it, but just understand that from your child's perspective, this may not feel very nice for the holidays. The other way that I've seen people use the elf, and I think it's hilarious, is this pesky little elf that's always getting into trouble. So when you use it like that, it can be that magical, fun thing. The challenge is that can also create stress for you, trying to think of ways, although if you're on Pinterest, you'll find a million ways, but setting that up, it becomes another job, because now the kids wake up every morning and they want to see what the elf is doing and what trouble he's getting into, which can be a lot of fun, but again, can create a lot of stress. So you need to decide whether you want the elf in your house at all, how you're going to use the elf, and how it's going to impact, what responsibility is it going to put on you to maintain the tradition or whatever it is that you decide to use it as. So, remembering to move it, remembering to, put it in antics. It's kind of like the tooth fairy. I don't know how many times the tooth fairy forgot to put money under my kids' pillows. And then it would leave notes and things. So it can become a bit of a burden. So we just want to think about some of these things longer term and what effect it has on us in terms of things to do, and also what effect it has on our children. So find ways to manage that stress, and you will have a much happier holiday. This can be a tricky one. So when we have young children, when we have babies often, sometimes family members are so excited about these babies that they expect you to, for example, come to their house. And we know when you're with young children, that can be not just the luggage you have to carry, but just the routines and things get all mixed up. So sometimes you have to set clear boundaries, particularly with family. And you may want to invite them to your house instead, whatever way you want to do it. But boundaries are important. Again, you're setting expectations and things like that. And sometimes, I'll speak as a grandparent, sometimes as grandparents, we forget what it's like to have a baby or a young child in the house, and how much going somewhere else for things can be a lot of work. So trying to help your family members realize that in a nice way, but being able to say, no, I don't think that's going to work for us this year. I know lots of families, they want to spend sort of the morning opening presents with their own families and then join the bigger family later. And sometimes everybody wants to be around to open the presents. And so things like that can be a problem. Who's going to cook dinner? If you've got a baby in your house, maybe it's not your year to cook dinner. Maybe, you need to ask somebody else, or maybe you do a potluck, things like that. So once you have kids, the holidays change, and you need to be able to be articulate and clear about what's going to work for you and your family, in the greater context of your extended families as well. There's lots of great websites that teach you the words if you're having trouble coming up with the words, how to say it. No, I don't think that's going to work this year. It's really hard for us to say no. Again, particularly as the women watching this, we've grown up with messaging often that says, you're supposed to make everybody happy and, forego your own needs for the needs of everybody else, those kinds of things. And when it comes to having young children, it's not forever, but it really is important to be able to articulate and to say, this isn't going to work for us this time, and then negotiate what might work for you better and what might work for everybody else. So this can be a bit of a tricky one, but it's an important one. This is also an important one and a difficult one for many of us. Asking for and accepting help. We live in a culture that sort of is very individualistic and really sends out a lot of messaging that the more you can do on your own independently without help, the stronger you are. And that's just a bold-faced lie. That's not how we were meant to function as a species. And trying to do it all yourself is going to burn you out. And what's going to happen is you're going to get sick. When you do too much, your body has ways of telling you. And if you don't listen, your body will make you listen. So have you ever noticed how many people get sick over the holidays? And that's basically the body saying, okay, if you're not going to listen to my other cues, like you're tired, take a rest, things like that, I'm going to do it for you. And then you get sick. So now you can't do anything. So asking for and accepting help is really, really important. It can be a hard thing to do. But what I will say is that when people offer help, it's because they can and they want to. So sometimes we feel like it's a burden and we don't want to intrude and things like that. But if somebody's offering, they clearly have the capacity to do it and they clearly want to. So what you're doing is really offering those people an opportunity to contribute and to feel helpful. And we all want to feel like we're helping other people. So that's one aspect. Asking for help can be a thing that is hard for us. But again, when we're asked for help, we're often very willing to do it. If somebody would just ask us, we're happy to do it. So again, we're offering somebody else that opportunity to contribute and to engage with us and to feel like they're being helpful. So it's important to figure out where you can ask for help. And if people are offering it and you need it, by all means, accept it. Because you're not only going to make your life easier, you're going to make somebody else's life feel more valued and feel really helpful. So it's, maybe you have to do a potluck for Christmas dinner once in a while, just because a big dinner with a baby or toddler in the house is a bit of a disaster waiting to happen sometimes. So asking for help and accepting help is an important part of life in general when you're getting overwhelmed and you've got lots going on. So I'm going to offer you a quick bonus tip. This is one that I learned at my oldest daughter's wedding. We live now with technology. We are so busy recording moments and documenting moments that we're not actually living the moments. So when my daughter got married, I was so busy taking pictures that I actually missed the wedding, which sounds kind of strange, but I missed the feelings of just watching her and her husband say their vows and watching their faces and all of that. So when I look at those pictures, they're lovely, but what's missing is that memory and that feeling that I should have had I been sitting and just watching the wedding. So I will caution you to, by all means, take some photos of your holidays, but don't get so caught up that you actually miss the moments and the feelings in those moments. Because what will happen is you will look at those photos and they won't have that connection. Photos are meant to connect us to a moment and connect us to feelings. And what they become is just a scrapbook on a wall. So again, by all means, take photos, but just be conscious that from the time our babies are born, they're actually born into this generation with paparazzi. It must feel like that to them sometimes. Somebody is just constantly taking pictures of them. And they're not old enough to decline. They're not old enough to say, no, please stop doing that. So we want to be respectful of our children's time, of those moments, but we also want to make sure that we're actually living the moment and not just documenting it for posterity, so to speak. So one of the things I sometimes get asked is, you talk about routines, and it's important to have routines and consistency. But what happens when, it's New Year's Eve and I want to go out and, spend time with maybe friends or family? We don't need to be so rigid that we miss out on opportunities to live life. But what we want to do is make sure that we're prepared for what's going to happen. So the younger the child, the easier it is actually to transport them to another house and put them to bed. And as they get older, it can be a little bit trickier. So making sure you're packing a bag that has, jammies, and there's sleep objects if they have sleep objects, and things like that, so that, understanding that this is a different situation. So it's going to be hard for children sometimes to do things like go to bed when it's not their home. Talking about the expectations, here's what's going to happen. Maybe you want to make a little storybook about it, New Year's Eve at grandma's or whatever. So that children, again, have this idea of what's going to happen. So everything's not kind of thrown at them when things are out of routine. But by all means, don't not go out. Double negative there, because, you want to be so rigid. And this can sometimes depend on the child. Some children won't sleep in their, outside of their own beds and things like that. But generally speaking, your needs to socialize and to enjoy the holidays is also as important as your children. You just have to think a little bit and prepare a little bit more for taking them out or having parties in the house and things like that. So that's important as well. I think it was Christine actually that said they used to have a celebration on New Year's for the kids. So the kids didn't know about time. So they would have their kids' party with New Year's. They would count down and everything else. And then the kids would go to bed, and then the adults could have their party. So those kinds of things can be really helpful for kids. They still feel like they're part of the celebration, but they're not sort of getting in the way of what the grown-ups want to do, because what you want to do is important as well. So that's my 7 tips plus a bonus. I want to thank you for joining in today, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday. And for those who celebrate Christmas, I will say Merry Christmas. And for those of you who celebrate something else, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season and your celebrations are joyous and fulfilling and restful, because we all need a rest. And all the best for a happy and healthy 2023. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you so much, Nikki. It was great having you. We really appreciate it. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everyone. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.